So welcome everyone to the 8th episode of StoryMaps Live. I'm broadcasting here from Washington, D.C., and I'm really excited to be joined by my colleagues and our featured storytellers, Vanessa Bézy and Jim Bentley. Just in terms of some ground rules and how things will work today, we'll be using the Q&A feature in Zoom webinar. So if you have a question, feel free to use that Q&A feature at any time. Write your questions in, and we've got folks from the StoryMaps team ready to answer any questions you have. We'll also be using the polling feature later on, and we'll be sharing our screen and presenting. We've shifted things a little bit. For those of you who have been to a StoryMaps Live before, it's typically only an hour, and it's typically in the afternoon, East Coast time. Today, we are focusing on K-12 educators and the latest updates to ArcGIS StoryMaps. And so we've shifted the time back so that folks on the East Coast who are teachers can tune in after classes are done. Jim Bentley himself was in class earlier today. And so we shifted things back. We've also extended this webinar to be an hour and a half. We've heard from a lot of you that you would like to have more time so that we aren't as rushed with the featured storytellers, the demo, the Q&A features. That leads me to our schedule for the next time together. So first we'll have a little bit of an introduction to what StoryMaps are and how to get started. Next, we'll hear from our featured storytellers. We'll hear a demo of the latest enhancements to ArcGIS StoryMaps. And then we'll have an extended Q&A where we can ask questions to our featured storytellers, as well as about StoryMaps. Like I mentioned, I have a number of colleagues ready to answer any questions that come up. So thank you for joining us, and let's get things started. So I'll hand things over to Alan Carroll, the founder of our team.
Great, thank you, Ross. Let me share my screen. Are you seeing a big red question mark?
Looks great.
Great, okay, cool. I'm going to be relatively brief because Vanessa and Jim have really great stuff to talk about, and I don't want to hog center stage. And I think probably most of you are already familiar with StoryMaps, but just in case, I'm going to give a quick summary. So what is a story map? They work on the web, and they combine interactive maps hosted on ArcGIS Online, Esri's cloud service, with multimedia content, so your photos and videos and audio, and text, of course, to tell stories about the world. And we're seeing stories about pretty much every subject under the sun at every scale, from neighborhood to planet spanning. They work on a variety of screen sizes. So in other words, they're responsive. We've worked really hard to make sure that story maps look great on small screens like mobile phones, and medium-sized screens like tablets, and big screens like your PC. And I think the big secret of our success is that they incorporate interactive builders. So the heart of the builder function is this what we call a block palette. So you can piece by piece use those blocks to assemble and rearrange and reassemble and edit story maps very, very quickly and easily and intuitively. So you can, if you can create a PowerPoint, you can create a story map. And story maps really provide this really rich, immersive experience with lots of interactivity. Story maps are hosted by Esri in the cloud. So that means you don't have to worry about hosting and maintaining servers and stuff. It does not mean that we claim any kind of ownership over your story. It's your content. It's just a convenient place to park it. We started going on 10 years ago, maybe 9 now. I've been with Esri for 10 years, but about 9 years ago, we rolled out the first of what became a series of what we now call classic apps. But we've moved on to ArcGIS StoryMaps, and I'm going to show you in a minute. I'm going to show you a separate, very short story that goes into ArcGIS StoryMaps in just a little bit more depth. It's what we really think you should be using these days if you can. Story maps have grown rapidly in popularity. It's been a huge thrill to see. We're now getting very close to 1.5 million story maps. Having just a few years ago started with just three digits, we're now up to 7 and growing. It's also been a thrill to see lots of organizations use story maps, including some of the leading conservation and humanitarian nonprofits. Many government agencies, especially say NOAA and EPA and USGS, all have dozens, hundreds, in fact, of story maps. Library of Congress is publishing a series of really cool stories. Smithsonian Institution is increasingly on board, and my alma mater, National Geographic, is doing stuff with story maps, which is really exciting. They're also exploding in the classroom. So in terms of just the sheer number of story maps, education kind of outpaces everybody else from the analytics that we see, and that's primarily because teachers are assigning story maps to their students, who then might create 30 story maps on similar topics, or they might work together in teams. We'll tell you more about resources and things in a few minutes or later in the webinar. So a little more on why ArcGIS story maps. The classic story maps we continue to maintain. They're going to be available for many months and years to come. But what we're not doing is actively updating and enhancing those apps. So if you want to stay out there on the leading edge, we think ArcGIS story maps are definitely the way to go. But they're for several reasons for that. One is, as I mentioned, the single builder. So what we've done is incrementally added to ArcGIS story maps so that there are user experiences that are similar to, and in many ways we think better than the experiences that you used to get in these separate builders. So now you only have to learn one builder, and within that you can find this selection of user experiences. And of course that also means that you can mix and match them within a single story in really interesting ways. Second is that we've added an additional, in addition to ArcGIS online maps and in addition to web scenes, we've launched and integrated Express Maps, which is designed especially for people who have had no exposure to GIS and want to create a relatively simple map. So you can create a series of points, you can add arrows, as you can see here, pop-ups, lines, areas, etc., in just minutes without in a very intuitive interface. So you don't need to be a GIS expert to create some really attractive maps. Third is that we've worked really hard to incorporate top-notch design. So some of our older story maps are starting to look kind of old. So we updated the design. We've also incorporated pre-built themes. So with a single click, you can change the look and feel of your story, including the background color and the font combinations, other graphic elements, etc. And then more recently, we've introduced a theme builder with which you can do more refined customization of colors and fonts, etc. So that's a really fun thing to kind of explore and use. We've also improved and streamlined the publishing workflow. Story maps autosave as you edit them. You can also publish a story, but then open the editor, make lots of changes without affecting that published story until you're ready to replace that published story with your new version. We've also worked very hard just to improve the performance of stories. So they load fast, they look great, as I mentioned, across a variety of platforms. For instance, when you upload a picture, story maps will automatically resize your picture so that even if you upload a very large image, it's not going to slow down the story, because when a user is scrolling through the story, it will automatically load an image that's appropriate to the size of the screen that they're using. And then finally, we are going to be continuing to update ArcGIS story maps. We've rolled out enhancements as recently as last week. A couple of times a month, we typically roll out improvements and enhancements, bug fixes, etc., but often very exciting new features. So that's kind of an overview of StoryMaps. One other thing I wanted to mention is that we're also relatively early in the process, but a very exciting process of investigating and thinking about how we can better serve educators with instructional story maps. So a key part of the idea is that you'd be able to embed a form, whether it's a Survey 123 or a Google form or a Microsoft form, within a story map, and then build that story map so that you're asking your students questions that they can then answer within that form, which then the instructor would have access to. So you can, we're considering, for instance, repurposing a lot of the geo inquiries that are very popular with teachers, and making them accessible via this much richer, of course, interactive environment with embedded forms. So if you're really interested in working with us on that, please let us know, because we're going to be asking for expert advice from teachers and educators, and we're going to be recruiting a subset of those teachers to actually help us produce stories. So if you're interested, please do let us know. And with that, I'm going to stop my share and I guess turn it over to Vanessa.
Great. I just gonna reiterate that this is my favorite part of StoryMaps Live, where we tune into some storytellers from the StoryMaps community and hear how they're using the tools in their work. So I'm really happy and excited to share that we've got Jim Bentley, who's a National Geographic Fellow and educator based in California, and Dr. Vanessa Bézy, National Geographic explorer and sea turtle conservationist, with us today. So let's turn it over to Vanessa to get things started.
Hi, everyone. Today I'll share a couple of the story maps that we've been making. I participated in a National Geographic educator exchange with an educator, Carolina Picardo, based in Texas back in 2019. And with her, we were developing, as a goal of the program, a series of story maps to introduce myself as an explorer and introduce the students to the work that I am doing here in Costa Rica. And so I will share my screen to share with you some of that. And then I may, if I have time, also share some of the work my nonprofit is doing with story maps. Okay. So this is actually an important question came up just before we started the call of how, whether we plan to have all of the stories linked, and that actually wasn't in our original plan. I'll share the links of these story maps at the end. We have basically, the way that we started working on this was that we created a shared folder on Google Drive where myself and the educator would meet once a week and have an interview, a conversation about different topics. Through that, we narrowed down that we wanted to kind of cover the basic life history of a sea turtle, then dive into more details of what it's like to actually do that research and get the students asking questions. And we really wanted this to be an interactive experience. And ironically, this is pre-COVID, but we were working remotely, so we were trying really hard to make sure that the students also felt engaged and connected with myself as an explorer, even though I wasn't there with them. So that was one of our main goals getting started. So we started this Google Drive, and the educator Carolina took great notes, and we worked on the text together. And then we just kind of took it at a time. And we started out with first the introduction to myself. Sorry, that one. Here it is. We started with the introduction to me. So a little bit about myself and the type of research that I do. And here we decided to include obviously a lot of maps since I'm somewhere remote. And I'm lucky enough to have worked with a group that did a 3D model of a sea turtle. So we were able to embed that in here. So having the embed function be so easy was super helpful. Add more of this content that moves so students can really get a little closer to the turtles. So after this first story map introducing myself, we also included in the story map in a few places links to different worksheets that have more information. These worksheets can be printed out and filled out by students. So here, for example, there's an interview with me. So for students that maybe didn't get to connect in live, they can read the questions that I answered. We've added these throughout the story map as we continue to develop it. And so this story map goes through the life cycle of a sea turtle. So students learn about different stages of the life cycle of the turtle. I have some videos, but we also found a lot of videos on YouTube that we were able to include so that students could see each stage of the sea turtle's life. We also included an embed of this wonderful project called OSearch that has been tracking turtles from the beach that I work at, that one of my colleagues tagged. And so here the students can actually click and interact and see this map and look at the turtles that tagged here and see each individual turtle's track, which is a really cool feature that we were able to add. And so another feature that I wanted to mention that really helped make our story maps a little bit more interactive is a platform called Edpuzzle. And this is a great platform because teachers are really easily able to collect these videos and questions that students have to answer while they're watching the video. And so we added this. We'd love to continue adding it to more of the videos so that students are, again, engaged and interacting with the platform. And then another really great resource I wanted to share that we tied in with story map is a platform called Flipgrid. This is basically a video back and forth platform where students can ask questions, create a video of them asking the question to me, and I can respond in a video instead of writing in text or another way that might be less personal. And so we invite all of the students as a story map to use the Flipgrid, and that way they're also able to interact and ask questions, submit videos with any work that they might have done with the story map. And so going back to the story map, just to walk you through, we have a few other places where they can click and interact with these different Edpuzzle questions. For example, there's another worksheet here. And this is something that happened afterwards. Once the pandemic started, we really wanted to create a way for these story maps to reach people. So we've created collections, and we also did live stream events, and then we embedded those videos here. So again, students that maybe aren't able to attend the live stream can see the video again later. And so just to summarize a little bit before I move on to the Spanish version, we ended up doing a series of story maps that have an interview so the students get to know me, and then we add components about the sea turtle's life, the special phenomenon that I work with here, the Aribara, and we made a really cool map of all the other sites in the world where this occurs. And then the last two story maps, I think really helped us get the students more engaged, where we actually assigned them to do research, to study a specific sea turtle species and to share with other students what they've learned. Before then talk about the threats to sea turtles, and students are also encouraged to take the challenge to find a solution, however big or small, for them to get involved. And of course, throughout the process to continue communicating and asking questions with me. And so these story maps have been a really great tool for us working with that class, but then being able to share it online and connect it also with all of our social platforms. And they were so popular that we decided to do a Spanish version so that we can reach more of the community here in Costa Rica. And so we've created a Spanish version of the story map, and we're hoping to do some live events this next year in Spanish. And that has been, I think, the only challenge that we have run into using story maps. There's very limited material available in other languages, and it's a little bit tricky to find content that's as great as the content we find in English. And so we've started to have to create a lot of our own content and videos. It's a little harder for us to find in Spanish. For now, I have subtitles available, but that can be a little bit more tricky. So hopefully we'll have a solution for automatic subtitles soon. And then before I kind of wrap up, I wanted to share also how my organization has been using story maps it's been a really great tool for us to simplify all of the research that we do. Kind of the biggest part of my work is science and science communication. And so it's been a wonderful way for us to really share and visualize the work that we do, explain how and why we do everything. And then there's a great to always have the donate button at the end, of course. So this is an example of a story map that we made for our water quality project. And so we give the community an explanation a little bit of the problem of how we've been seeing this brown foamy water, wondering what's going on, even though we're a protected beach. So we share with them where we're sampling and how we do this analysis. We're even able to embed a virtual tour that we made and share all of our results this way. So we're constant so that the community is always aware of kind of the latest updates. And we hope to do this for all of our other programs because it's really been useful for us to share and kind of summarize all of our work. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. So please hesitate to ask questions. And I'm gonna go ahead and add in the chat right now the links to the English and Spanish version of the sea turtle story map. And I can also share the water quality as well. There you go. Stop sharing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Over to you, Jim.
Just to give incredible props to Vanessa for the resources that she's built, because I knew of her work before I knew her. And I've actually used some of what she's put out in these story maps as a multimedia text. I mean, what we're seeing, and I'm a 5th grade educator in Northern California, is like the cutting edge of what education could be. Your big publishers aren't doing this, right? Esri's doing this, StoryMaps is doing this. And this is like real time materials that teachers like me teaching in a pandemic with distance learning absolutely thrive for. So this is wonderful. So beautiful to see the work that you're doing, Vanessa. My name is Jim Bentley, and I am a 5th grade educator in Northern California. And I'm also a National Geographic Education Fellow and an explorer with a grant for the last couple of years that we've been working on tracking plastic waste as it moves from suburb to sea. If you're an educator and you're watching this, story maps don't have to have a single map in them. It could be text, it could be audio, it could be video, it could be photographs. If you're a school administrator watching this, please consider, if you adopt materials, please consider thinking outside the box and embracing some of these kinds of tools that your educators can benefit from, because with adoption cycles every 7 years, you can't get this kind of up-to-date current resources. So really, really love seeing what story maps can do. I'll go ahead and share my screen. This is a classic story map. This is one of the ones that Alan mentioned earlier. And this is actually resulting from a geoinquiry project that my students and I embarked on, which actually started from reading a novel. We are actually started reading this week, A Long Walk to Water. So 5th grade novel, and it's a great story. One of the key things that we learn in this story is that around the world, people have to walk many, many hours, many, many miles to get water. So this kind of created a question in our classroom of how accessible is water where we live in our own community? And with a very simple tool like Survey 123, which is really not hard to learn, Anita Palmer, who's with us as a participant or as an attendee, taught me everything I needed to know about Survey 123 in about an hour. But these little red dots that you're seeing on the map are basically sources of water in our community. And what we found was that water is really accessible. One day, Saturday afternoon, 152 data points, all kids needed a smartphone and a QR code reader. Go to the park, find a water source, go to pre-pandemic days, go to a coffee shop, go to a restaurant, ask if you could get a free cup of water. We found that water is everywhere where we live. So this was really an inquiry based on a piece of literature that asked, or that got students asking questions, which is exactly the kind of thing that we want our students to be able to do. Not bubble in worksheets, not take a standardized test, not grid something out. Sometimes we need kids to actually go out and explore. During this course of this exploration and all these places that we went to, one of the things that we noticed was that nowhere in our 40 square mile city were we finding reusable water bottle filling stations? Plastic cups were available everywhere. Water fountains were available everywhere, but none of the water fountains had these reusable water bottle filling stations. This led into kind of an inquiry into marine plastic, marine debris. And again, with the story map, with the side panels, this text is actually student written in Google Docs. This is research that students created that they co-authored, and then we literally just copy pasted in. Some of the resources that we found, like videos, we could also embed as well. So we're really kind of building like a digital showcase for what students are learning. And you can bring in photographs, you can bring in text. Again, you can embed videos in the classic story maps. You can do the same thing in the new story maps as well. So ultimately, what you've got here is a container for a student inquiry, a student project that could cross all kinds of boundaries. It can cross writing, it can cross reading, all your NGSS, many of your sustainable development goals, you can bring them in here. This is a Google Sheet, a survey that we administered to 576 students about their water drinking habits, right? We've got math, we've got inquiry, and it's all contained in this nice little container. We also worked with our Parks and Recreation department in our city and invited them into our classroom. We spoke with them about what we observed and what we found at the nearly 100 parks that we have throughout our region, which was that there are no water bottle filling stations anywhere. Our school districts, we had the same meeting with them, and their response was new schools have bottle filling stations, old schools don't, they have to be retrofitted. And we were told that we could raise funds to do this, but we were really excited. Our community services district agreed to work with us in terms of visioning into the future with the idea of making water accessible and reducing plastic waste. And they have committed to putting in reusable bottle filling stations in a park. So, what started from a novel led to an inquiry, which led to exploration in the community, which led to reading about marine plastics, writing about it. I mean, this is like just a multi-layered type experience that we can curate in a story map. So this was our first really deep dive into story mapping. This year, we've been continuing with the idea of plastic and marine debris. And for the last 2 years, we've had a National Geographic Planetary Stewards Grant. Last year and this year, we've been working on understanding where plastic goes once it's away. And what we've learned is, there is no away. I was hoping to take students on a fieldwork expedition to a local MRF, a material recovery facility, but because of COVID happening in the spring, it didn't happen. And what I learned ultimately was it was actually kind of a blessing in disguise, because what I would have wanted my students to see, they would not have been able to see, because going out onto a MRF floor is not allowed. There's too many dangers. So what I've used in this story map is a new story map, the ArcGIS story map. And I've got video and I've got text that has been written by me in order to take students on a virtual field trip. So they are actually able to see a lot more than what they ever would have seen going on a traditional field trip. So again, we've got a side panel of text that can float along. We can share things, we can embed things. It's just a really elegant container for teaching a unit. And I wish, like textbooks would be like this of the future. Perhaps someday we could be. But a MRF is a really fascinating place to go to, and it's not something that everybody gets to see. Just like with Vanessa story maps, I don't go diving with turtles and whale sharks, and I don't see these things. So she can take us into a world that's just unknown to other people. So how does a MRF work? What does it do? Where are pain points or problems that MRFs encounter? What are things that they want to have happen versus not have happen? These are the kinds of things that I can bring students into and show them, all with highly visual tools like a story map. So I really have appreciated this so much, that opportunity to be able to use this with my students. This last 2 years, we've been working, going around throughout the community in which we live to map plastic along creeks and along storm sewer inlets and storm sewer outlets. And one of the things that we wanted to tell is where we've done field work. So again, with an ArcGIS story map, these are data points that we can collect very easily with editing, dropping in a point on a map. This story map, we can embed videos, and we can embed text as well. We can have, maps zooming into places. This is my school. Every point you see on a map is actually a storm sewer inlet. And if this was the live map that we could actually click on, you'd be able to see data points pop up, but you can kind of get a sense of where we're working at the school, where we're working near the park at our school. It's kind of a record of the exploration that we've been on for the last couple of years. So again, a classic story map as well as a ArcGIS story map would share all of these pieces. The grant that we've been working on the last couple of years has also been built in, starting off with the classic story maps, but this is really fun. With a survey 123 data point, I can see that Zane and these students collected data, and at this storm sewer we found 31 items of plastic with 3 pieces of other trash. We had a really big hot spot in one of our storm sewers where we collected several hundred pieces of plastic, and what ultimately students realized was that when plastic floats away on the streets or in the sewers or the streets, it goes somewhere, and that somewhere is typically in a storm sewer drain that goes to a creek and then eventually flows out to a river, which flows into an ocean. So that being said, again, we've got this bundle of research, student written, this bundle of data that students have collected related to marine debris and marine plastics. And it's just been an absolutely amazing tool to get to learn how to use. This is actually the survey that we've been using for the last 2 years. It's a live survey embedded in the story map itself. There's even a QR code that goes with it. This is a tool that we can use to advertise to other people. Hey, join us, become citizen scientists with us. Scan the QR code, go out to storm sewers and creeks, collect data, submit that data, and upload your data to our findings. We've had educators in Alaska and some in Los Angeles even contribute to this. It's been a really fascinating way to connect with educators around the country, and also to explore, things that we're seeing in our own backyard. So really just a simply elegant tool that we can use that combines all of these moving data pieces. More recently, just with this year, we're getting into the idea of looking at human rights, using a story map to those that I know would be collected in one place as compared to like a YouTube playlist, embedding documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, having videos that are in line that I can have students view as part of our project. This has been a really simple tool to use, and it's something that I really, really admire and appreciate, and thank the StoryMaps team for building. Photo essays. This is something that we're working on. We started last year, failed miserably. This year is going to be a lot, I think, better results. But using a story map to do a simple photo essay. If kids can go out and photograph, if they can write a story about that photograph, they can build it into a ArcGIS story map with like a sidecar like this. Again, text accompanying photographs. Very simple, very elegant builder tool. If I can learn how to do this, I know students can, because typically my students are about 1 or 2 steps ahead of me. So really just a nice way to package and bundle inquiry that we do. So our inquiry really is focused mostly on plastics and where it is and where it's going. It's pivoted to the idea of human rights, and it's really hard to say where it's going to go to next. So I've really, really appreciated the chance to be able to learn these tools and learn from people like Anita Palmer and her husband Roger and the StoryMaps team as well. So that being said, I think I hit most of what I wanted to share, if that's okay.
Awesome. So I would love to open it up to questions from the audience. We've just seen some really compelling things, and feel free to write your questions in the Q&A feature. I see there's already a question in there, and that was prompting me to ask you both, how long did it take you to learn these tools and to get started using StoryMaps, but also some of those other like Survey 123 and Collector, and it seems like you guys have gone pretty deep into the world of GIS.
I think the new story maps, the ArcGIS story maps, is very user friendly. That one builder is super simple to get up on the runway and off the ground very quickly. From my experience, Survey 123, I was really worried about the technology. And what I've learned from people like Anita and Roger Palmer was that it's really more about the questions that you ask. It's really not the tech. The tech is very forgiving. That's just been my own personal experience. So the easiest way I think was to start with building a survey with someone who knew more than me, and then go out and try just a little bit of data collection, come back and look at the map and see what we've got. Vanessa, how about you? What's your experience been like?
I found it pretty easy. I mean, I've played around with building websites, so maybe that's a little biased, but overall, I think it's a super user-friendly interface. And the only issues I ever ran into, I always had, as soon as I messaged someone, there was always a solution right away. So I haven't struggled with it too much. I think the only thing I ever had issues with was like trying to upload certain types of content if you get really creative. But overall, I think it's been really easy and quick experience. For me, it helped a lot to work on it first outside StoryMap, which was actually a recommendation, I think, from Ross and Alan from the get-go, of just putting together a Word document, starting to compile the photos and the videos and the links and everything that you're going to need, and it'll make the process of putting it together a little bit easier.
And just to piggyback, looking at the chat, I know the links that have been dropped in, the Learn ArcGIS websites built with story maps have been really super helpful for me as well. And I found just, starting with one thing, like just do one thing, right? One survey, a couple of data points, and then kind of play with it from there was really helpful for me.
That's great to hear. Another question that came into the chat was, how did you handle intellectual rights and permissions particularly when students are creating their own, or in your own, creation of stories?
That's a really good point. So you'll definitely want to check with your district and your site about student privacy media releases. For our district, each year we collect student media opt-in, opt-out forms. For any grant work that we do for National Geographic and probably other organizations, there will definitely be like a media release form as well. The thing I love about story maps and signing into, with students with an ArcGIS account is you can structure it to where there's no personally identifiable information present. So my students have student numbers that have no PII data. They can sign in, and there's no issues with FERPA or COPA or any student privacy laws, unlike other platforms that might require a Microsoft or a Google sign in. So we can just completely avoid that mess completely. Our basic rule is if there's any photos or videos that we upload, that they have to either be produced by us or they have to be Creative Commons licensed or public domain, which is actually a nice opportunity to teach intellectual property rights as well. How about you, Vanessa? I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add to that. Yeah, I mean, I would obviously make sure we usually use all of our photos. If they're not ours, we'll give credit. And obviously most of the YouTube videos are all in the public domain from our side. We also usually make our own maps as well using the GIS platform.
Great, thanks. A bunch of other questions are coming in, which is really fun. Keep posting your questions. Okay, question for Vanessa. Did you do any customization to your maps, or did you use the story map straight out of the box? And how did you do those side ping panels?
I don't think I did anything out of the ordinary. I'm pretty sure it was just kind of all of the standard settings. I believe you're talking about the sidecar feature. So maybe that's something new that wasn't in the old version if you're already familiar with so there's an option to do sidecars where as the user scrolls, the text comes through. And I kind of played around a lot with doing sidecar on one side and then the other side. And I tend to have, everyone has their own stylistic choices, but very minimal customization. Honestly, it was pretty much straight out of the box.
Excellent. Let's see. In terms of your workflow, do you typically keep your stories? There's a question from Nikki Dave. So the project that we do is private or public view. So that might be asking about the software itself. So in the app, you have the option to publish it publicly or publish it privately so that anyone can see it or just you can see that. And I'll demo that in a little bit. Okay, there's lots of story maps questions that we'll dig into in a little bit. We'll have time to do more of a Q&A at the end with Vanessa and Jim. I think at this point, we'll transition to doing the live demo, which will hopefully answer a lot of the questions that we're seeing. But if you think of any questions for Vanessa and Jim, they'll be around for the next bit as well and be able to answer those questions. Okay. So in this portion of the webinar, I will demo the latest updates since the last StoryMaps Live. So the last one was in September. And a lot has happened in StoryMaps, a lot of really exciting new features. So I'll start though with a very basic how to get started with ArcGIS StoryMaps. So let me just share my screen, we can get started. Perfect. So here I am in a new browser tab, and I always recommend going to this website to get started. If there's anything from this demo you remember, it's this URL, esri.com/storymaps. esri.com/storymaps. What this does is it brings you to the StoryMaps landing page, where you can get an overview of what you can do in the product itself. You can explore stories that have been created by authors like Jim and Vanessa. And you can explore them by different topics as well. Some of them might have storytelling tips, but others are more themed around different topics. In addition, we have a set of curated resources. These resources are anything from how to plan a story out to the 9 tips to great storytelling. These are meant to be resources to help you build your skills and get started using ArcGIS StoryMaps. Now, these can also be really helpful resources for your students or for people that you're working with who perhaps want to dig a little bit deeper into the tools. Now, it's also really easy to launch ArcGIS StoryMaps right here in this blue button. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now, what happens when you launch that is it'll prompt you to log in, and you'll see your stories page. So your stories page is where you can see all of the previous stories that you've authored and go back and modify them at any time. You'll see some have this blue badge that says whether it's been published, the purple is unpublished, and you'll see others that are in draft progress. This is also where you access something that Vanessa demoed in her example, is collections. Collections is a way to take a series of stories and combine them into one space. So say you have a set of stories like Vanessa showed, where they're all connected to one another. You can create a collection that's just themed around a topic. Now, they also don't have to be connected to one another. They can be separate stories. And you can see some of the collections that we've been working on. So what I want to show now is just how you would start to assemble a story. It's really easy to get started. You just click New Story, and you have the option of starting from scratch or starting with a quick start template. So that just populates the story with some of these various features. For right now, we'll just start from scratch. What this does is it launches the builder. The builder is where you assemble all of the content for your story. Now, what I'm going to do is just show you the basic building blocks and then get into the main enhancements that have happened since the last StoryMaps Live. Okay, so I'm just going to start writing some text. My story. And as Alan demonstrated earlier, the main components of ArcGIS StoryMaps is this block palette. So to assemble a story, you build it with these various block content types. So up here we have our text and buttons and separators. In the media area, that's anything from maps, images, video, audio, embedded content like an embedded YouTube video. We have this swipe block that's really powerful, sidecar, slideshow, and map tour. Those are more immersive blocks that allow you to create customized experiences for your readers. Let's just start out by adding some text. Okay. So let's just say we wanted some text that said introduction. Now, when you highlight that text, you have the ability to change the text formatting. So perhaps you want it to be larger, or you want it to be a heading. You can also change the color of that text at any point. You can continue to assemble your story by adding more text or adding things like buttons. Buttons are really good for resources, so like learn more about a topic. Esri.com/storymaps. That's the link that everybody's going to remember after this presentation. In addition, you can add images really easily. I'm going to add a cover image up here. And when you add that image, right now it's a little bit smaller. If you want to make that full width, you have the option to customize the design of your story using the design panel. So for instance, if I want it to be full width or side by side. Now, depending on the story that you're telling, it can be really powerful to start with a beautiful image. This is a drone image taken of some marsh on the eastern shore of Maryland. And it provides this sort of eye-grabbing, immersive start to a story. Now, like before, we can continue to add more content to a story. One of the most powerful features is how easy it is to incorporate geographic data into your story. So by clicking on map, you have the option to add maps a couple different ways. These are all maps that I've created from scratch using Esri's cloud mapping tools called ArcGIS Online. And you can see you can do anything from a scene like this. And place it directly in line in a story. And you can just start to imagine how much more engaging, a lesson plan might be if you had this globe with some thematic information on it that your students could then explore, zoom in on, and tilt and pan and start to learn about a specific topic. The second way you can add a map is through a tool called Express Maps. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Express Maps, It's a lightweight mapping tool that doesn't require any GIS experience. You can simply start adding points, lines or polygons, or even text to it. So let's go to Costa Rica. Because who wouldn't want to be in Costa Rica right now? Oh, let's not go to Costa, Texas though. It's interesting. Let's just see in here. There it is. And Vanessa's around here somewhere. And so you can just simply click on the map and add a point really easily. And you can add that directly into your story. Now this can be updated at any point and customized really easily. So say you wanted to change the color of these. Add text, lines, polygons. Now the goal of this demo is to get you started with the various, with the tools, but really I want to focus on the latest updates. We have other videos and other resources for digging into all of the tools. I want to show you the latest updates. So I've prepared a story that really just focuses on the top enhancements to ArcGIS StoryMaps. So I suggest checking out our other resources if you are just getting started and want to learn more. So the first big feature that's been updated is Express Maps. You now have the ability to change the style of your points. You can make them larger, smaller. You can change the colors really easily. And you can create custom icons. So say you want to have an icon that's an image. You can do that really easily. And you can see now that this is the logo for StoryMaps. It's really easy then to change the size of it or change the image itself. This lends itself to doing a lot more customization of your maps using Express Maps. Another feature that's exciting is you can organize your content here in the content pane. So maybe I'm starting to add a lot of points and I want them all to be in the same location. So these folders or content groups can really help save time. Now in here, you can change the style. So the size or color of those. So you can see how that can save you a lot of time if you have 10 or more points. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, you can also add custom base maps here as well. This feature has been around for a little bit, but I think it's really powerful and want to show it again. Okay, so that's the first big enhancement, Express Maps. The next one is Theme Builder. So Theme Builder allows you to customize your stories and adjust things like the color of the text or the background. Let me show you how you can do this. So here in the design panel, we go to the theme area. Now you can try out other themes just with one click. These are the sort of default themes. You can also click this manage option. And what that does is it gets you into the theme builder area. So you can see I've created other themes that are customized already. This demo theme is the one that I've been working on here. And you can do things like change the header to be dark or light. You can change the story background. Maybe you want it to be evoke a different feeling. You can also change the fonts to match your organization's brand or your school's look and feel. It's really easy to adjust these things. Buttons, you have customization there. Separators as well. You can see those options. You can also do a full. You can even add a logo here, and so I'll add that StoryMaps logo right in. You can see it appears there. When you're done, you just click Publish. It does a little health checker, and you're ready to start using that theme. So I'll go back to my story, and I'll refresh it. And you can see that that theme is now being applied. It's a really powerful feature that folks have been asking for. Now, the only caveat I'll say is it's really easy to go too far with the theme. You can create some pretty garish and unlegible themes. Say you have really low contrast themes, and it's really important to make sure you're thinking about your audience and the purpose, and make sure that all of your content is really legible before going too crazy into the theme builder. Next, we have some new text formatting options. We've heard that it'd be nice to be able to have a size below the subheading size, but above the paragraph size. So we have this large paragraph now. And so it's really gives more options for being able to style your text the way that you want it. Another new feature is in the map tour block, which is one of those immersive blocks. You can do a batch upload of images that have content in them. So say you have images that have spatial awareness. So you take a picture with your iPhone or your Android device, and it has the lat long associated with it. You can upload those all at once, and it will geolocate those points for you. So let me just show you how this works. You click on the Map Tour Immersive block. You go to Yes, Upload Photos. I'm going to browse to my my folder here, and I'm going to select these images from some of the social distant activities I've been doing. And then you click Create Tour. Once you create the tour, it'll ask you which layout do you want, whether it's this sort of guided or Explorer. I like this Explorer experience, so I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to use the grid layout instead of the list format. You can always go back and change that at any time. Okay, so with that, I've just taken 6 different photos, geolocated them, and I've got this nice grid layout, and I've got this the ability to customize these. So with Map Tour, you can go about your normal functions, just because we don't have a ton of time. You can get a sense for how you can then go and customize them. For those of you who don't know, you can also customize the map here by selecting a different base map. Click Done. And with that, you can get the sense for how you can really powerfully do this batch upload of images and create a map tour without needing to go one by one, finding the address, finding the specific location. And it's a lot easier. Really powerful feature that we can't wait to see how more folks use. Okay, the next one that I want to show is our collaborative workflows have improved. So many folks have been asking for the ability to have multiple people working on the same story at once. And it's kind of difficult to do that because, you know, there's sharing privileges and things. And we've been able to make this a little bit easier through something called shared update groups. Now, for folks who aren't deep in the GIS side, this is a feature in ArcGIS Online, which is Esri's kind of cloud ecosystem. It's kind of like the Google Drive of Esri, where you have all these different apps that are hosted in the cloud, you know, like Google Docs or Google Spreadsheets. ArcGIS Online is that sort of hub where you have access to all of these different amazing, powerful tools, including StoryMaps. Now, in there, you can create groups that allow people who are part of that group to edit different stories. We've written extensively on sort of the workflows for doing this in some blog posts, and my colleagues, where I will share the link to that. Essentially, one of the biggest new features is when you publish, you can publish directly to a group. And when you look at these groups, some of them have edits enabled. This means that anyone who's part of that group can edit the content that's in that group. So if I publish this to this Living Atlas collaborations group, anyone there can edit it. Now you can think about how this would be really powerful for a class that has multiple students working on a similar project, and you want them to be able to collaborate on them together. We have some safeguards in place so that if multiple people try to edit at the same time, you'll get a notice saying, hey, somebody's already editing this. So this will help prevent having your work kind of overwritten or losing work. But we still recommend the best practice of writing all of your text outside of the story so that you can edit it and have a backup in case something disappears or gets deleted. Feel free to ask any questions that you have in the chat, in the Q&A area. I'm sure I'm going pretty fast, but I'm sure my colleagues will be answering those. The last feature I wanted to demo, which is hot off the press, I think this went live yesterday, it's the ability to have the navigation bar linked to text within an immersive section. That might not make sense at first, but the navigation bar is located in the design panel, and you toggle this button to turn it on. Now, this text up here serves as a bookmark sort of thing. So you can jump to different sections within the story. So you can see, you know, the first one was Express Maps, then I demoed Theme Builder, text formatting options, map tour, collaborative workflows, navigation bar, and yes, there's a navigation bar. And the last one, the new one, is this header text. So see how that jumped into this immersive section? That's a new feature that was just released. So now your readers can, you know, use that navigation to jump into immersive sections if they're trying to move throughout your story. Now you can also jump to the credits section, which is down here at the bottom. So in the design panel, if you've got credits enabled, you can see down here, you know, I've written about this story. And again, you can change the formatting of that text really easily. To modify this text up here, you just click on the gear icon and you can check these boxes if you want. There's a handy icon that shows that, you know, this is sidecar and this is in the story. It's an inline story heading. And perhaps I want to turn some of these off. I'm not interested in that one as much, or that one. So you can see this is shortened a little bit. Okay, that's a lot to throw at you all. And so I'm going to stop there. And what we'll do is we'll transition to our live Q&A session. So this is a chance for anyone to ask questions using the Q&A feature, and we'll answer them live for you all. These questions don't have to just relate to what I just demoed. We've got Jim and Vanessa here. Looks like it's getting a little dark where Vanessa is. And so feel free to ask questions in there. And that's what we'll transition to now. While that's happening, I'm going to open up a poll. I'm going to launch this poll, and it's related to these latest enhancements. So take a second and fill out this poll to let us know which enhancement you're most excited to try out, whether it's Express Maps, the theme builder, text formatting options. And we'll let this go for a couple of minutes. And I'll catch up on some of the Q&A that's been going on. So again, there's this poll happening right now in Zoom. It's been going for a minute right now. We're getting some great responses. And I'll just let it go for another 10 seconds and then end it, and we can see what folks are most excited about. Okay, here are the results. Okay, can you guys see this? Okay, so folks are excited about Express Maps, Map Tour, collaborative workflows, navigation bar updates. That's good feedback for us to know kind of what folks are interested in exploring. Excellent. Okay, so Alan, help me. Are there some questions that came in that we can jump into?
Yes, I haven't been paying close enough attention, but I think maybe Amelia or David could help out.
I see one that's for Jim here from Hillary Smith. I imagine for digitally savvy young kids, StoryMaps is intuitive and engaging. Have you found young students are able to navigate it and use it themselves, like creating their own content or their own maps? Excellent question.
Really good question. The ArcGIS StoryMaps, the new version of ArcGIS StoryMaps is going to be a lot more user-friendly, intuitive than the classic StoryMaps. Some of my really talented kids were able to navigate, bits and pieces of that, but they still need some guidance. And oftentimes by giving them guidance, I'm learning too. So I wouldn't just say, turn them loose, here's the keys. I would say, turn them loose, here's the keys for a thing, but they will need guidance.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you, Jim, as a follow-up, how much are you using StoryMaps as a presentation tool to to describe different topics and engage your students? And how much are you using it for the students to actually go and create their own stuff?
That's a really good question. With distance learning right now, because no one's in person in my district, I'm starting to turn to it more and more and more as a tool for presentation, for interaction. I'm not teaching by PowerPoint slides. I'm teaching by building learning experiences. So that involves providing kids text, audio, video, photos. In terms of showcasing, work that we've worked on or things that we're doing, the first kind of baby steps story map that my students will be building this year will be a photo essay. If we can get photographs taken with captions and do that in a sidecar, I'm going to feel really, really good about that. So that'll be kind of our first launching point.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome.
It's yeah, it's fun to it's our experience has been that some students can pick up story maps at a really early age. I've gotten to know this kid named Mihir, who has been to several of the user conferences, and he first created a story map when he was in second grade, I think, and he did a pretty darn good job. Now that's unusual, and he's come back every year with more and more sophisticated stories. I think he's going to end up as CEO of Esri one day. But I think my guess, I'd love to hear from you, Jim and Vanessa. But I think a good starting point in general would be middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and then by high school, kids are really able to pick these things up very quickly. But what's your sense about a good age to get kids started in producing their own stories?
I would say if you're willing to co-construct with students or be a co-learner, or the lead learner, or sometimes the lead learner, I think 4th and 5th grade is very doable. My students use Final Cut Pro to edit film, which is complex, but when we do it together, so 4th and 5th grade is very doable if you're co-constructing. I think that's very reasonable.
A question for Vanessa. Brian Thompson asked, how are you using the drone in your work? There was a photo of you with a drone, so folks are curious about that.
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, we're a little tied up right now with drone regulations, but a few years ago, I was using the drone to study sea turtles in the water to look at their distribution and how dense the turtles were, which happened to be a lot. So you should Google that later to see the video. I can share the link as well. And now we're hoping to get back out there once we get through permitting for a lot of different purposes. We also use the drone. You can create large photo mosaics of areas for us to understand more the spatial distribution of habitat that is still functioning and how we can keep that protected for conservation purposes. And overall, yeah, the drone is a really great way to mix mapping with real images and really engage people even more.
And Jim, are you using drones in your work? I saw a flyover of your school that you showed, which was really cool.
Yeah, we do. I've got 5th graders flying drones, more for capturing aerial imagery, photos or video. We haven't gone into any LiDAR or super cool stuff like that, but 10-year-olds flying drones 400 feet up gives a whole new experience of seeing your community. So it's been very empowering for them, especially my students who are furthest from opportunity, who've never had experiences like that. It really is amazing to watch their minds be completely blown when they suddenly realize where they are, in the grand scheme of things. Because we're in a valley. Sacramento Valley's flat. There is no elevation gain except, with a drone.
Another fun question for the panelists. Do you have personal favorite story maps that you've seen or created in terms of, the stories that you've come across?
Michelle curates like these beautiful collections of just gorgeous story maps. And my favorite one is right now the Sounds of the West, the acoustic story map where you can literally hear as you're scrolling through. It's just mind-blowing. My students absolutely flip for that.
Yeah, it's called Sounds of the Wild West. And a simple Google search will turn it up.
Yeah, maybe we can post that in the chat.
I don't know if I have a favorite. I've been getting more and more interested I saw one on iNaturalist, a project. We've been using that here to collect observations of wildlife, and I just saw a really beautiful one that was shared on the National Geographic forum of someone who did a project, and it shared all of the observations of all of the wildlife, and it's also georeferenced data. So it was really cool to see that, and we hope to do one of those for our project as well.
Yes, yeah, that specific story works. Yeah, we've helped support another explorer named Brian Bumma, who does life at the extreme. So he looks at, you know, the species or the plant species that are at high and low latitudes. So yeah, and crowdsourced data and citizen science is such an engaging way to get people involved and really engaged with place-based education, right? And so, you know, both of you, that's a common theme, both of your approaches to both your scientific work, where you're getting people out, collecting data, asking those questions and sparking curiosity. What drove you to take that approach?
With students, you know, doing the geoinquiry process of, you know, asking questions, collecting data, you know, visualizing what you've got, and then ultimately creating a story that drives in action. You know, students are accustomed to being told things and asked things and consuming things, but they're rarely, you know, in the position of being given the empowerment to actually go out and collect and understand things on their own. And as a project-based learning teacher, as a geoinquiry teacher, when you can get kids collecting data, it makes that learning so much more relevant. So, you know, for me, it's, you know, learning by doing. Where I went to school, Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, you know, learn by doing was our motto. You know, go out, break it, fix it, learn from it. So
Yeah.
It's very powerful. It doesn't mean that you walk away from all traditional teaching. There's still, you know, quizzes, and there's still reading, and there's still, you know, lecture and things that they will consume. But if that comes with the creation of knowledge, oh, they're so much more engaged and so much more relevant.
Cool.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jim. I think that for me, in my work, I very quickly learned it's a lot more than about just sea turtles. There's a lot of other wildlife, and we have a community here that needs to live and in balance with nature. And so a lot of my work isn't just conservation work. It's about telling the story, explaining the science in a way that's approachable and interactive, so that people really understand what we're doing. And our work is always more powerful when we have community members that are participating, learning how it's done, even doing some of that research themselves. It just makes a huge difference. And as a conservationist, our main goal is in the end really to change human behavior, and it's pretty difficult to do. But I think that story maps, storytelling, and really get people involved is one of those ways.
Thank you both. Yeah, that's so inspiring. And Vanessa, I wanted to hear just a little bit more about your nonprofit and the work that your nonprofit does, and how folks can learn more about that.
Yes, thank you. I will share a link. We're the Wildlife Conservation Organization. Organization. I was just hiding the link and I said org. Wildlife Conservation Association. It's an organization that I founded here at the Ostinal National Wildlife Refuge in Costa Rica. It's one of the most important sites in the world for the olive ridley sea turtle. We have a very huge phenomenon here where there's thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of sea turtles that simultaneously on this small beach within the refuge. And I have essentially started working in sea turtle conservation, and now working kind of in all aspects of sustainable development, sustainable tourism, and wildlife conservation in general in the area. So our work mainly focuses on science, coming up with the data that we need to take the right appropriate conservation actions, and then obviously communicating that with the community, with students, with parents, with the government, with everyone, so that we can create the change that we need to continue to protect this really important and special place.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what it's like having thousands of turtles just storming a beach.
Yeah, it's
And
incredible.
It's just
that,
it's so well for me. I think what's more surprising is that you know, the locals, the people that have grown up here, it just seems so normal to them, and they actually, I think, in ways I'm trying to convince them that it's worth protecting. But to anyone else anywhere else in the world, who knows the tiniest bit about sea turtles, it's really very impressive, very special. Yeah.
We're in the still relatively early stages of a much broader and deeper alliance and collaboration with National Geographic, and so you can imagine the potential here for explorers like Vanessa to be telling these incredible stories that then get distributed to thousands and thousands of school kids. It's just incredibly inspiring stuff. One of the things I love about story maps is that they are empowering, and they're also gateways that they serve as a means by which kids get exposed to the wonders of geography and GIS, and it changes lives. And it's just an incredibly exciting thing. I think we can change a lot more lives as story maps become used more broadly in the classroom.
Vanessa, as you were talking, another question came in from Hillary Smith. Have you found that StoryMaps allows non-academic project partners like NGOs, civil society, communities, policymakers to engage with your work and learn about your project? I imagine it's a great tool to get outside of the framework of the academic publications and create public scholarship, but wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I have a PhD and I have an academic background, but a lot of my work in the community and working with the local government, I realized how much all of this science that gets published in peer-reviewed literature obviously is very, very important part of the scientific process, but much of that doesn't reach the community. And so these story maps are a great way for us to very quickly get the information out there in a timely manner. And that's extremely important where I'm working here, because it's actually one of the fastest developing surf towns in the world, right next to this beach and this important nesting site. And so it's very important for us to get this information to the right people at the right time and in a way that's really approachable and not too dense and difficult to understand. And one of the things that I think has been on with story maps is, you know, being able to embed even a whole virtual tour within. And so right now, you know, it's fundraising season, and being able to share with a donor a story map about our whole program that shows all of those different interactive components that we've been working on can be really powerful. I hope.
Yeah. And were you able to share? Okay, I see the link up in the chat for your organization. Great. You know, just I would love to hear a little bit more about Olive Rigby turtles. I'm sure a lot of people don't know like fun tidbits about them. So if you have any like things that you wish everybody knew about these turtles, fun facts, I personally, that's a little self-indulgent. I'd love to hear from you on that.
Well, I think the best fact that if you don't know about turtles, you should definitely know is that sea turtles have a magnetic sense, so they can actually detect the Earth's magnetic field. So they essentially have a little GPS unit embedded inside of them somewhere that helps them find their way back, quote unquote, home. And so that's really, really special capability to have to travel thousands of miles and return sometimes to the same small stretch of beach to nest year after year.
Amazing.
I start laughing. I can barely get around town without my GPS, so it's pretty impressive.
That's so good. Thank you. Thank you both. So we're coming up on the end of the hour. I want to let everybody know that this session has been recorded and will be made available through our YouTube channel. We'll process it and put it up. It might take upwards of a week, so expect it to be live next week. We'll share it through our social media channels, and you can also find it by just searching StoryMaps YouTube, StoryMaps Live YouTube. And so with that, I want to thank Vanessa and Jim for taking the time to share your amazing work with us all. I know we've learned a lot from you and are so excited about the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for joining us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. This has been wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, so with that, thanks everybody, and stay tuned for more next time.
All right, bye-bye.